On January 9th, Microsoft announced an Xbox Developer Direct, and right from the bat, Xbox already set the expectations by announcing the first-party games that would be featured: Avowed, Hellblade 2, Ara, History Untold, and, surprisingly, Indiana Jones. Much like the one they did last year, they focus on the games releasing this year. So let's do a recap and I'll give my thoughts on the Direct. The first game shown was Avowed. While the developers talked about things such as environment and setting, the two main things talked about were the combat and the choices the player will make. The combat shown had the developers talking about dual wielding and how this alters the gameplay. They could have shown gameplay fighting more than just some mooks, but it wasn't bad. The quest demonstration could have been better. The gameplay footage had the player go through a hostile area to find out the whereabouts of a lost party, while the developers talked about the decisions the player would have to take, only to show just one of them. With these kinds of demonstrations, it's better to show the different outcomes possible rather than just talk about it. Hellblade 2 was the second game to be talked about, and it wasn't good. Dev diaries are fine on a long presentation format like the Developer Direct, but in Hellblade's case it was bad because Ninja Theory already did this before. Twice. It felt like rewatching their previous showings of the game. Hellblade 2 would have been a much better presentation if it were a long, uncut gameplay demonstration with developers talking in the background rather than what it was. They did end on a positive note announcing the release date of May 21st. After the Developer Direct was announced, a few insiders claimed that besides the 4 games listed by the Xbox, a 5th game would be shown. And to a lot of people's surprise, it was Visions of Mana. I don't think anyone expected a third party on the Xbox Focus showcase. The presentation was focused on the monster design for the series and the inspirations behind the mouse that will be available to use in the game. It also talked about elemental powers and spells, but unlike the 2 previous games, it actually showed gameplay featuring what the developers were talking about. Another surprise was the release window of summer 2024. I'm skeptical of it and won't be surprised if they delay it, but if they can make it, so much the better. The 4th game shown was Ara, History Untold, and this one probably had the better presentation of the Direct. Ara is a turn-based strategy game where the player takes control of a civilization and has to achieve supremacy over the other ones. The game is made by former Civilization devs, so it's not surprising the game is so similar, but the presentation did a good job of telling, and more importantly, showing what differentiates Ara from Civilization. While there are things that are the same, such as triumphs, which are this game's version of wonders, there are some big differences, such as the layout, which uses irregular shapes to defend the map instead of hexagons. It also has simultaneous turns instead of regular turns, which speeds the game and puts a bit more emphasis on predicting what the opponent will do. Before this presentation, I barely remember Ara and thought of it as just that game that is like Civilization. Now Ara is definitely on my radar. The show ender was, of course, Indiana Jones. I had a chuckle in the beginning when they were talking about the movies and pretended that Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny didn't exist. And later in the presentation I had another one when they erased Temple of Doom's existence when talking about the game's timeline. Clearly they were leaning on classic Indiana Jones to talk about this game, which I don't blame them. I would have done the same. Speaking of the game itself, for a first showing it did exactly what it needed to do. Calm down Indiana Jones fans and entice players in general. From punching Nazis to whip-cracking to Tomb Raider, an Indiana Jones game through and through. My only nitpicks were that some of the animations looked rough, and the game was given a release year of 2024, which does inspire confidence. Overall, the Xbox Developer Direct was good. None of the games shown came out worse than they were before the presentation. At best, they just remain where they were. Hellblade 2 and Avowed could have done better since their presentations were just repeats of previous ones. Visions of Mana was good, but its showing on an Xbox presentation made me curious about the series' performance on Xbox and Game Pass. I've seen some takes talking about how Mana was a JRPG pander in the Direct, but I disagree. Xbox clearly treats Persona as the JRPG pander. The Mana series was available on Game Pass for some time back in 2021 and 2022, and this is just me speculating, but I think the Mana games must have reached a larger crowd than expected for both Microsoft and Square Enix back then, and now they are hoping to repeat the success. Ara and Indiana Jones were the big winners of the show. Indy managed to please both fans and non-fans, while Ara went from an almost unknown game to a game that I can see being on the watch list of a lot of people. The only bad thing that permeated the show were the release windows. With the exception of Hellblade 2, none of the other games really inspired confidence that they are releasing on schedule. Indiana Jones was the biggest offender of that. Thanks for watching. These were my thoughts on the Xbox Developer Direct. If you want to add something to what I said, leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you around.